Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 13th of January. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, Republican senators in the United States join former Fed policymakers in pushing back against the criminal investigation into Jerome Powell.
More Iranian protesters are killed as Trump vows to hit the country's trading partners with a 25% tariff.
Plus an X-rated reckoning. The UK vows to enforce a law over sexualised images generated by Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
US President Donald Trump is facing growing opposition from key Republican lawmakers and former Fed officials over a criminal investigation into Chair Jerome Powell. Senate Majority Leader John Thune says the threat of a legal battle with the central bank could make confirming Fed nominees challenging. Meanwhile, Bloomberg understands Trump allies are worried the investigation could discourage Powell from leaving the board once his term as chair ends in May. He could stay on as a Fed governor until 2028. Here's former Fed Governor Betsy Duke.
It's hard for me to see Jay Powell leaving the Fed board, leaving his seat unoccupied and subject to appointment to somebody that he may not have confidence in, particularly while this lawsuit is going on.
Betsy Duke speaking as the US Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, revealed that she did not seek sign-off from her bosses at the US Justice Department before issuing a subpoena to the Fed. In a post on X, the former Fox News host says she also has no plans to back down from the investigation into Powell.
Now, countries doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff on their goods, according to the US president. Writing on social media, Trump said that the new duty would be effective immediately. Iran's largest trading partners include China, India and Turkey. However, it's not yet clear if the US levies would be in addition to current charges. The US has already imposed levies as high as 50% on Indian goods tied to their purchase of Russian oil. Meanwhile, an additional 25% tariff on China risks upsetting the trade truce that Trump negotiated with Xi Jinping last year.
The threat of new American tariffs come as activists say more than 640 people have so far been killed in a crackdown on Iranian protesters. A White House official told Bloomberg over the weekend that President Trump had been briefed on a range of options for military strikes in Iran, including non-military sites. According to the official, the president is seriously considering authorising an attack. Speaking yesterday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the use of military power in Iran remains an option.
One thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. What you're hearing publicly from the Iranian regime is quite differently from the messages the administration is receiving privately.
Caroline Leavitt also confirmed that an Iranian government official had contacted the president's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. Those comments come after Iran's foreign minister said on Monday that security forces have full control of the country following weeks of violent unrest.
Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi is reportedly planning to call a snap election. The Japanese yen has dropped to its weakest level against the dollar in more than a year on the story, reported by Kyodo News. Bloomberg's Brian Fowler says it would be a high-stakes gamble.
She's got stronger support than I think I've ever seen in my lifetime for a Japanese prime minister. So that's looking good. On the other hand, the LDP as a party has not fared quite as well in surveys. People are still a little bit unforgiving towards past scandals in the party. And more importantly, or at least as important, the ruling coalition now is different from what it was in past elections.
Bloomberg's editor for Northeast Asia governments, Brian Fowler, speaking there. Takaichi recently and currently benefits from a 70% approval rating, so many expect a vote could increase her mandate.
The CEO of UBS, Sergio Ermotti, says banking reforms in Switzerland are going too far and have become politicised. The Swiss government wants to impose as much as $26 billion of new capital requirements on UBS. Ermotti's bank has said the planned reforms are a threat to Switzerland's economy and its own business model.
We fully understand the necessity of taking the lessons learned from what happened at Credit Suisse. But we believe that the current proposals are not really reflecting what happened at Credit Suisse.
UBS CEO Sergio Ermotti speaking to Bloomberg there in Shanghai. The Financial Times, meanwhile, is reporting that Ermotti is planning to step down in April 2027, citing unnamed people. The CEO led UBS as it became a finance behemoth after absorbing its national rival Credit Suisse in 2023. But Credit Suisse's collapse and UBS's size has led to Swiss lawmakers concerned about the financial risk the bank could pose.
A court in Paris will begin hearing today Marine Le Pen's appeal over her embezzlement conviction, which may prevent her from running in next year's French presidential election. Last March, the far-right leader and other members of her National Rally Party were found to have misused over 4 million euros of EU funds. Le Pen was handed down a 2-year suspended prison sentence and a 5-year ban on running for public office, which came into effect immediately. A decision from the Paris Court of Appeal is expected by this summer. If she wins, she would then be eligible to run in next year's election. If she loses, the National Rally is expected to field 30-year-old Jordan Bardella as its presidential candidate.
And the BBC has signalled some of its defences against President Donald Trump's $10 billion defamation lawsuit at a court in Florida. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts has the details.
The BBC has told a federal judge in Miami that the Panorama documentary at the centre of Trump's defamation case was fair, despite a misleading edit of one segment. The broadcaster asked the judge to pause the exchange of evidence until a ruling's issued on the BBC's motion to dismiss the case. That's due in March. The BBC also said it wants to move the case to New York because the claim relates to a documentary that it, quote, did not create in Florida, produce in Florida or air in Florida. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
Those are our top stories for you this morning. Let's look at the markets. Big gains in Asian equities. We see the Japanese yen weakening to the lowest level since July 2024. And this idea of a snap poll. No more details from Prime Minister Takaichi speaking in Nara. Currently, the Nikkei 225 is up by 3.1%. US stock futures this morning are nudging lower after reaching a record on Monday. Treasuries, not much positive reaction despite the pushback to the DOJ's approach and pursuit of the Federal Reserve. The dollar at the moment slightly firmer. European stock futures are up 0.3% on the Euro Stoxx 50 futures, and we get the US CPI data later. Those are the markets.
Well, in a moment, we'll bring you more on the opposition to the latest pressure on the Federal Reserve, plus how the UK plans to respond to the controversy over images generated by Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok. But another story that we've been reading this morning about the question of not just living longer, but living better. Alice Robb's been writing about this for Bloomberg Pursuits. She went to Sardinia, which is one of those so-called blue zones famed for people living longer and healthier, for a retreat which focuses on slowing down, meeting local artisans and focusing on community. It's not quite the wellness retreats that you might read about right. for other places where there's extreme fitness regimes or extreme beauty treatments involved. The activities there included things like baking bread or pressing grapes. But the wider theme of the piece is that the importance of community is really the key to these blue zones. People live closer to their family. They have more interconnected relationships with them as well. And she goes into some of the scientific research behind that. And, you know, we all know that loneliness is very damaging in older years as well. But it's perhaps a different approach to how you reset that and place some importance on it.
Yeah, I love this story. I mean, I actually think that the Sardinia lifestyle that she describes in some way extends to lots of parts of the Mediterranean. And yes, it is about a kind of plant-rich diet and natural movement and those strong community ties. I mean, it doesn't hurt that there's a good dollop of wonderful sunshine, light, sea, trees, and as you say, that kind of even communal exercise together. It's also a place, and lots of places along the Med, famous for kind of artists and that kind of artist lifestyle. So I get it, but it's, and she also talks a little bit about the translation of how actually a lot of CEOs and a lot of business leaders are looking at this as a kind of example for how they should lead their lives. It's about quality of life, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. But I suppose the question is how much can a retreat actually make you change your habits and you go back to your real life, which she does touch on in the piece as well. Well worth a read. We'll put a link to it in our podcast show notes.
Now, let's bring you more on the pressure on the Federal Reserve and opposition from key Republicans to the grand jury investigation into the central bank. Our senior editor, Alistair Bull, joins us now for more. Alistair, good to speak to you. How significant is the opposition that is emerging from Republicans to the investigation into the Fed?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. It's critical. First of all, I think it needs to be said that it's quite unusual to get any pushback against the president from his Republican colleagues in the Senate. But I mean, there's been a little bit more of that recently. And on Sunday night, what's most significant is Republican Tom Tillis came out and said, until this legal cloud is cleared up, he will block any nomination for the Fed to come from the Trump administration. And that effectively prevents the president from appointing a chair to replace Jerome Powell, whose current term as chair expires in May. Until this is able to do that, because the Senate Banking Committee is split between 13 Republicans and 11 Democrats, if he crosses the aisle to the Democrats, he deadlocks it, and any presidential nomination for the Fed has to be confirmed by the Senate. And it starts with the Senate Banking, and if they won't advance that nomination to the floor of the Senate, it won't get a vote. So it just stops there. That's what makes it very important. And furthermore, you've heard other complaints from other Republicans. They may not have gone as far as Tillis, or they may not sit on the banking committee and be in a position to directly interfere with this process. But it's clear that they're very uncomfortable with the revelation that the DOJ has sent subpoenas to the Federal Reserve.
But will this have any effect on the Trump administration's campaign against the Fed?
Yeah, I absolutely think it will. If you look at this morning's press, I don't know how much the president reads, but we do know that he reads the New York Post. The New York Post has an editorial saying this was a bad play. This is going to backfire. This is not going to do what you want it to do. I mean, step back. The Trump administration is trying to push down borrowing costs because they hope that will help them win the argument with American voters later this year that they've made America more affordable. It may not work that way, but undermining market confidence in the integrity of U.S. monetary policy definitely doesn't help them do that. Since this story broke on Sunday night, you've seen 10-year Treasury yields push up. They haven't pushed up by a bunch, but they're definitely not low. They're sort of hovering around 4.2%. And that matters because U.S. Treasury, 10-year Treasuries are what are used to price mortgages. And this is all about mortgage affordability, which is a key concern of the Trump administration. House prices are very high. Housing affordability is a major concern, and they know from polling that voters are not happy. So this push is blowing back in their face, basically.
Yes, and we'll continue to watch the market reaction. Alistair Bull, thank you so much for being with us, our senior editor, talking about the Fed. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, the growing backlash against Elon Musk's artificial intelligence tool Grok creating sexually suggestive images of people without their consent. In the UK, regulators have opened a probe and the Prime Minister has vowed to enforce existing laws and create new ones. Our reporter Tiwa Adebayo is with us for the latest. Tiwa, what has the UK government then said on the issue of Grok?
So the Prime Minister has come out quite strongly against this content that Grok is creating. He's called it disgusting and shameful. And as you mentioned, he's vowing to enforce a law banning the sexualization of people's images without their consent. He's really the latest leader, though, to hit out against Elon Musk's X for the generation of those thousands of sexualized images, particularly of women and children that we've seen in recent weeks, and that's through its AI assistant, Grok. And for the UK, at least, I do think this latest condemnation does represent something of an escalation here. Essentially, what is going to happen, according to the Prime Minister, is that from this week, the government is going to enforce an offence that was established in last year's Data Act that made the creation of non-consensual intimate images illegal. And Starmer has been speaking to Parliament yesterday. He said basically if X can't control Grok, the government will. And it seems like he's planning to to do that using the force of the law. He's also leveled some quite direct accusations at X. He's accused them of protecting the abusive users in this situation as opposed to the victims. And this also comes as the UK's communications regulator, Ofcom, has launched a formal investigation into X and whether it's breached British laws in allowing that content to be generated and shared on its platform. And if they find that that's the case, we could see a fine or other restrictions for the X platform.
Yeah, I suppose the criticism of the UK government, though, was that it was lots of strong words, but really holding back in terms of the action. What are other countries doing? The US Congress doesn't seem to be acting.
Yeah, you're right, Caroline. We've definitely perhaps seen stronger actions in other countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. They've already placed heavy usage restrictions on X as a result of this situation. Remember, indecent images are particularly a sensitive issue in socially conservative regions like Malaysia and like Indonesia. Malaysia temporarily blocking the program until it says it sees effective safeguards implemented, and Indonesia also instated a temporary ban. We've also seen India's government voicing concern over Grok, a similar situation in France as well. I mean, there's definitely a growing quorum of discontent with X and with Musk that seems to be bubbling around the world.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.